How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of LandO's Logic. Today we are ranking every team after roster mania. It has been a wild roster change period. Tons of teams have made moves. We got some player debuts. We have some new teams starting to line things up, all in preparation for Major 4, and more specifically in preparation for champs. It is going to be a wild time, and this major, let me tell you this, like, we just had a meeting the other day with all the talent. Everybody was given, like, talking about storylines and stuff. I promise you, Major 4 is going to be the best split that we have had all season long. The storylines are there. The vast run that all of these teams are trying to make right now is so exciting. It's so enticing to watch. What feels like 6, 7 bubble teams right now who are all in a mad dash to make sure they can be inside of that top 8. So with all of that madness, right, all of these things being considered, I thought that it'd be fun to not just give power rankings, not just to look at the teams, but to look at the teams and their trajectory, if you will, post roster mania. Now, as of the recording of this video, some of these are not official. I'm going off of what feels like to be set in stone. It feels like the announcements are just, you know, moments away, if not days away. Maybe even by the time you record this, some of these things are becoming more up to date, but I'm just doing it based off of what looks to be happening. If you don't see this video, then darn, but we're gonna do our best and hope that this does stand the test of time. So without further ado, we're going to make our way up the list and start with the D tier. And yes, there is going to be a team in the D tier, and it's going to be Paris Legion. Now, there is something to consider because it sounds like there is some moves being made in the Paris Legion camp. However, they are the 12th seed right now in the overall standings. They hold 20 points, and that is it. They've got one online victory this season. You know, I applaud them for making this move, but it just feels like they're too slow on the trigger. Like, I love this decision from Paris, right? We've been talking so often about how it's probably gonna be something with the SMGs. It feels like 2-3 series in with Tom Gravity in the lineup, it was instantly known, okay, AR's in a much better spot with he and Temp. Now let's address the SMGs. Every single series, plus 25, negative 25 when it comes to the ARs versus the SMGs. And while it is unfortunate that John is going to be heading out, I think it's a great opportunity for a player like Johnny to step into this lineup. Obviously, a challenger player's been playing with Clay's team. Didn't have the greatest performance, it sounded like, when it came down to the Toronto Major, but it sounds like he's got a great mind for the game. And obviously, if he's been able to make his run up the way that he has, I think it's worth the shot if you're Paris. And I love the idea of having Johnny and Jimbo together. They're going to need a lot of consistency. The only problem is that I feel like the motivation or I don't know, like, I want to put Paris out of the D tier. You can't really do that. And I feel like the primary reason why you can't do that, despite the roster change, which I think makes them better, is because this lineup is only going to be motivated by the chance that they have. Like, Major 4 is going to be their champs because it's like they have to go 5-0, win Major 4, and like 5 teams have to basically not win a single thing in order for them to make it to champ. So I feel like the primary, I don't know, like the drive behind this team and this move would be if they had a chance still. And with that not really being the case, 0.01%, whatever it is, it just feels like if they lose one series, if they lose their opening game, which they have Optic, Seattle, and LAT, it feels like they're going to get robbed of their mentality. And so I feel like it is difficult for Paris to really move up. Again, I'm happy about the move. It's just way too slow on the trigger for me to elevate them any farther than where they sit. But again, it's going to be fun because Paris are going to essentially be like the Reapers of the CDL. Every team that they beat at Major 4 is going to be huge and could very well rob a few teams of making it into that top 8, or vice versa, getting teams out of the top 8. So we will move on. So this is where things get kind of hectic. Like, the CB range is going to be up for discussion. And as I said, I am also adding in what our current standings, what our current, I don't know, I guess rankings right now, along with some future picks as well for the teams that have been involved in roster mania. And coming in to start things off in the C tier is the Boston Breach. I hate to do this. I really do. I hate to do this for the Boston Breach, and I've tried to come up with all kinds of different situations, all kinds of different scenarios, but I can't. It is worrying time for the Breach Boys. It's not like I said Beach Boys, but Breach Boys. We'll roll with it. They currently hold the number 6 seed heading into Major 4. They go 1-5 in overall matches at Major 3, and obviously had the top 12 placement after getting 3-0'd by Minnesota in the losers bracket. I mean, we saw a huge decline in overall productivity from the team. You know, from Major 2 to Major 3, they saw one of the biggest dips in all of the CDL. You know, Methods goes from the number 1 KD to like top 30, I think somewhere around like top 30, top 35. And it's not just on Methods, obviously. It has been how reliant the team was on him. He obviously gets impacted by the rest of the roster. So it's not as if we're just pointing out Methods. It's just to show the path that this team has been on. There was clearly an issue fundamentally with the roster. And like I said, they've had their great moments. And I feel like the roster change that they're making, if you were to tell me, like, is Boston making, or if Boston is making a move, is that a good decision? Yes, I think it is. It's just tough to really pick out a particular player. And right now, Vivid for Capsule. Vivid obviously coming from the Florida Mutineers. Capsule is going to be headed to the bench for now. It's just hard to justify. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Capsule, but obviously he did not have a great Major 3. It feels like for Boston, pace is something that they're addressing. Capsule does not have a ton of engagements. Nero does. If you look at the damage numbers between both of those SMGs, it is night and day. So I feel like they are trying to speed up the pace. The problem being is that I do worry about that pace increasing, because Boston say, okay, cool, we got one of the slower SMGs, we need to ramp it up by adding arguably the fastest player that we have in the entirety of the CDL. And that is something that terrifies me. Something also that does worry me is that Capsule is one of the best S&E players that we've got right now in the league. Holds like, I think, a top 10 KD right now in Search Destroy. They're adding in Vivid, who is not one of those players, who's not great historically in Search and Destroy. And so if you are going to increase that pace, if you are going to essentially take away from your Search and Destroy, it worries me about where Boston sit right now. Because if you look at the S&D numbers, which has been the bread and butter for Boston historically throughout the year, S&D has been their game mode. Methods and TJ were not good in Major 3 at Search Destroy, 0.6 and 0.7 KDs. That then relies upon Nero to be the sole guy if Vivid is going to be that same S&D player. Now, I think Vivid will be better than he was on Florida. It's just, I feel like this is not the right player to bring in if you are the Boston Breach. I don't know. I'd say, like, I enjoy the fact that Boston is going to give this a go. I think that Vivid and Nero could be a very scary team, could be a very fast-paced team with a lot of aggression. I just worry about the SMGs being too fast for the ARs, and I also worry about the S&D taking a massive decline, which I think is fair to say, given that Capsule is their best Search and Destroy player. So we will move on to the next team in the C tier, which is going to be the LA Gorillas. Oh, there we go. Gotta make sure we get that right. LA Gorillas sit with the number 7 seed right now heading into Major 4. They've gotten a total of 10 points. 10 points since their Major 2 victory. Since they took down Atlanta FaZe, they've got 10 points since then, which is not good. 1-8 in overall series, obviously including the Pro-Am, in very, very dangerous territory of falling out of that top 8. There are 2 teams in particular who a lot of people are looking at for to drop out of that top 8. Boston and specifically LAG are one of those teams. Now, Gorillas also, like Boston, did make a move. However, it is a substantial one, making 2 roster changes. Hook and Slasher are staying on this team. However, Spart is being brought back in for Gunless, and they're deciding to pick up Neptune in place of Asim. So I think bringing back Spart makes perfect sense. I think Spart is a very talented player. It's difficult, obviously. You know, he had the lowest numbers in the CDL. There's a lot of people talking about, Spart wasn't the right decision. I don't blame LAG for making that move. At the same time, I also don't think it was the right decision, because, like I said, Spart had the lowest numbers out of anybody in the CDL during his short online stint with the team after the Major 2 win. So it's hard to it's a hard move to make. It's a hard decision to call for, but I think what Spart has shown us in Challengers is that it was an LAG problem, it wasn't a Spart problem. And so I think bringing him back is the right decision. I hate the fact that Asim is gone from the Gorillas. I really do. I think it's more of an Asim and Hook issue where you got to figure out one of the two. I know Asim has not played well lately, so he's obviously the one to fall in line. But LAG with this decision, I think bringing in, Spart is a good move. The ARs, I think, are going to be in a good place. We'll see how solid they are. I think Spart is going to be able to provide this team with a lot of great search destroy prowess, which is, again, what you want to see from a few of these bottom tier teams. You're not going to be able to compete with the big dogs consistently in the respawns. Where you really can get under their skin is in search destroy. And I think that not only is the SD going to get better because of Spart, it also is going to get better with Neptune. If you look at his numbers at the Toronto Major, the man was a menace when it came down to search destroy. He obviously is one of the winners of that Toronto Major, along with Major Maniac and Two Real, Brack, etc. But they are relying heavily, are the Gorillas, on this SMG lineup to save their season. Hook and Neptune are the guys that will define whether or not LAG stay in that top 8 or if they start to plummet. They don't have an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination, but the one thing to think about is that I debated for a long time about, is LAG ahead of Boston? Is Boston ahead of LAG? Both teams making moves, so it's very hard to call where they sit. These teams both have very difficult schedules. Boston, more specifically, out of anybody, I think has the most difficult schedule. However, both of these teams are facing off against each other in this qualifier, and that very well could be the only points that they get. It very well could be an 0-5 and a 1-4 performance for both of these teams, who, like I said, are on the bubble, holding on for dear life in that top 8. It very well could come down to who wins that series is who stays in the top 8, or who at least prevents that from happening earlier rather than later. So that is a game to definitely keep in mind. I think it's one of the last games that both these teams play is versus each other. Next team that we're going to be taking a look out for here in the C tier is going to be the London Royal Ravens. I hate to do this. I really do. It's just, it feels like panic mode for the London Royal Ravens. They've got the 4th seed right now in the standings. Overall, I think you're okay if you are a London fan. If you're part of the organization, you're not necessarily as concerned, for example, as LAG or Boston, but sitting in that 4th seed is fine. But they've continued to drop down little by little. They've started to falter. And they very well could lower to like a 6th, 7th seed by the time that these qualifiers end, depending on how well they perform. But it just feels like ever since the Gizmo departure, they have seen huge struggles, right? 3-7 in overall series with Harry, including Pro-Am. They've gone 4-12 in hardpoint since he left as well. And that was their game mode, right? Where we talked about constantly. This is a team that can break every hardpoint. This is a team that can make a run. It almost felt like the EU version of Seattle. And we've seen the great success that Seattle have had. London have not have seen that same success or those experiments work out. And again, I think it comes down to not a bad player in Harry by any means. It's just the team didn't work out for him. There's a lot of people talking about how slow both of these players are. Is it really going to work out? Him and Zero together. And obviously it did not. Hey, like I said, right now it feels like for the Ravens, these guys just need some confidence. I think 2 wins would put you in a wonderful position if you are the Ravens heading into LAN. I know it's weird to say, you're not looking for the positive record. Of course you are. But I think at least getting 2 Ws, getting prepared for LAN, getting this team back in form is really what they need to do. It's to focus on the LANs. It's to focus on just making sure the game plan is solid and getting back to what they were able to do at the start of the season, which was excellent. Like I said, I don't think it's panic mode yet for the Ravens, but it is not far away if they start to lose some early matches. And really, if things don't work out with Gizmo, what happens then, right? That's the thing. Like if you bring back in Gizmo, which doesn't always work, you can't just bring back in a player and expect everything to snap back to where it was. What happens if it plummets early? That will be something to think about if you are the Ravens. Let's move on from the C tier now to the B tier. And we are starting things off with the Florida Mutineers. They're off a top 6 placement at Major 3. They beat Optic, lost to Seattle, lost to Toronto, and they have been busy. It feels like Florida, more than almost any other team, has been in the conversation about different roster changes, different moves. Again, I know as of the recording of this video, not a whole lot of things are 100% confirmed with this team and with other things. Again, I'm going off of what I hope will be the case, but they have been very busy. As I said, there have been rumors about Asim, V-Cole, Neptune coming back, Yee's their substitute being brought into the lineup. However, they're going to be bringing in Major Maniac and Two Real, 2 members of the winning team of the Toronto Challengers Open, in place of Vivid and in place of Dave Patty. So I don't know. I was kind of expecting just one move out of Florida, whether it was Dave or whether it was Vivid. I didn't expect for both of them to go, but the instant thought that I have with Florida, and I'm not trying to, talk about how, Vivid's going to go to Boston, their SD is going to get worse. Florida, now with Vivid gone, their SD is going to get better. I'm just talking about from an overall who you're adding in versus who you're substituting out. I feel like SD instantly gets better with the Florida Mutineers by bringing in somebody like Major Maniac. He's known to be a search destroy master. I've had the chance to interview him over the years, and during his stints at different times with the Minnesota Rocker, he would talk to me. He'd be like, SD is not something that we are worried about, right? We are not worried about search destroy. I am not worried about our search and destroy is what he would talk about so often. And so ever since then, I've always thought, okay, well, anything the Major is on is going to have a good game plan when it comes to S&D. And so I think it's great that you are going to have a mixture of chemistry. You're bringing Major in, but you're also bringing in a rookie and 2Real, who has been on a number of different teams. He's kind of been the Silver Surfer recently of the Challenger side, but obviously had that huge W at the Toronto Major. I've seen his name be brought up. I've been told that he is one of the top prospects right now in Challengers. So it's great. It's great to see that he is being brought up to this team. I know he wasn't their first option, but that doesn't mean that he can't still be a solid player for them. And again, it's hard to know pace-wise how he's going to match up with somebody like Awakening. But again, I feel like Florida is starting to figure out their identity. I doubt that 2Real is going to be as fast as Vivid. So with that being the case, I feel like Florida, again, gains the identity of a team that's going to slow down. They're not going to be nearly as fast or maybe off kilter. They're not going to have 3 slower players mixed in with 1 fast player. I mean, arguably they had the fastest player in the league and the slowest player in the league in Dave Patty and Vivid. So you are going to have some semblance of everything being a little bit closer together. We'll see if that harms the respawn. I don't think that it will dramatically. And then also, I think the search destroy gets better by instantly having somebody like Major in the lineup. I know a lot of people are talking about how, Major Dave Patty, what's the difference? There is going to be a difference. As we said, Major has that history, an experienced player. I think he's going to have a great performance in search destroy and put up around the same numbers at the very least as Dave would. Major could be low on the engagements, but again, I think that what he is providing the team communication-wise is something that Florida needs. So I think Florida needed better communication. I think they got that. I think they needed to have a better search-destroy game plan. They've got that. And I really wanted to see their pace start to match up with each other. And I think that happens as well. Again, big question marks. Half the team changes. We're bringing in a rookie that we just don't know how he's going to play. But I think from Florida's perspective, I think overall they did a pretty solid job with the team. It does feel a little bit like a panic move because they sit outside of the top 8 right now with the 10th seed, tied in points right now with Minnesota, but head-to-head wise sit in the 10th spot. This is a last-ditch effort to try to get forward, and I do respect the decision. And it's one of the roster changes that I actually like that we saw teams make, considering that it was a big 2-man move. So let us move forward into the beats. Here we go, and we're going to be looking at the LA Thieves next. Yes, they sit carefully at the 8th seed, 10 points away from the 10th seed, 10 points away from the 6th seed. So you can see they can absolutely shift upwards or downwards depending on any and every result that they have got. LA Thieves will also have a very, very interesting schedule given the fact that they're facing off against New York, they're facing off against Florida, they're facing off against quite a few teams that are on the bubble along with themselves. I don't know. They had a wild Toronto Major. Obviously, the LA Thieves did not make any decisions, or rather, not make any roster changes. But it was weird, right? They start off facing off against the Minnesota Rocker. They beat them handily in the search destroys. That is the only reason why they got to beat the Minnesota Rocker was by dominating them. I think it was on Bocage. And I forget the other search destroy. Was it Siege, possibly? I don't really remember. But it was a shock that they were able to beat them like 12-3 in round count combined between those games. They go into that series versus Atlanta FaZe, absolutely smacked. 45 minutes to an hour later, they face off against Optic Texas, and they beat him 3-1. They literally get knocked out by Toronto, but it's just like, it was the same story from Major 3 qualifiers, where it was they're either 3-0ing or they're getting 3-0'd. When this team is hitting their peak, they are without question a top 4 team in the league. It's just a matter of finding it. And it's hard to judge this team. It's hard to figure out where they're going to sit. But if they are reaching those peaks from time to time, I mean, it's hard to bet against them. It's hard to bet against a team who has showed us the skill and the talent that they truly have got from day to day. I don't know. It's an interesting spot right now for them to be in. I know they are great when it comes to land. They have the 3rd highest average land placement out of any team in the CDL, behind Atlanta FaZe and Optic Texas, obviously. So that is something to think about. Like I said, when this team gets to land, they're a different beast. We'll see if the online performance can improve or at least become more consistent. I know some people were thinking about, could a change be happening with LAT? It feels like we've been waiting on a roster change to happen with this roster. However, it has not happened, and it's not going to. It's not going to, and it very well could benefit them in the end, depending on how they close out their season. So again, LAT, a mixed bag, but you definitely liked spurts that you saw, especially that Optic victory, versus or out of the LA Thieves. I mean, victories versus Minnesota and Optic, you will take that if you're any team in the CDL, specifically if you are LAT. All right, we got to advance. We got to get forward here. So let's talk about our next team, because I feel like this one could be a little controversial, right? We got Atlanta, we got Minnesota, New York, Optic, Seattle, Toronto left. Who are we jumping toward? I'm jumping toward New York. Now, you might have already expected Landon. Why haven't you already done New York yet? Like, why haven't we seen New York maybe behind LAT, or maybe even farther down the list? I think, unlike the LA Thieves, New York, when it comes to major lands, they've struggled, right? They have been a shell of themselves overall. Now, they did win the Pro-Am, which was on land, but if we're talking about major land performances, they still sit with a grand total of 0 victories. 0 victories that count on land. It's hard, right? I mean, what? That opening match versus Seattle, Jay and I had the cast on it. They were down 2-0. They finally start to catch some momentum. They win the control. They win the hard point. They're up 5-3 in the S&D, and they allow for Seattle to come back. S&D has got to be the focus. And also New York would later get beat by London. But Search Destroy, to me, is the focus for the New York Subliners. It has to be. They have got the biggest spotlight on them, it feels like, out of every team right now on the bubble. Just because everyone's wondering, like, is it possible? Like, can New York actually make a run? Is it feasible? Is there even a chance that they can make a run? And if you haven't had a chance to do so already, you can feel free to check out the other video that I've made. The last video, LandO's Logic, I talked in depth about what New York has to do, their schedule ahead, everything. Broke it down piece by piece, went over the numbers. And in case you want a quick, TLDR about it, it essentially is possible. Yes, it is possible for New York to still make it into the top 8. However, it has got to be a 4-1 record roughly in the qualifiers, along with a top 2, top 3 placement at the major, give or take. And it also is dependent on pretty much everybody that's around them right now. Pretty much everybody that's around them in the standings, all the bubble teams, how they perform, and especially, Boston, LAG, London, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, S&D to me is the overwhelming looking point for the New York Subliners. They have played 17 S&Ds since Major 2. 10 of those have gone to round 11. They've went 1-3 in round 11 since Major 3, and it feels like those clutch moments finally caught up to them when it came down to Toronto. The S&D loss that they have versus Seattle is round 11. The game 2 loss that they had versus London was in round 11. That obviously changed the series up when they lost versus them. And when they were winning the Pro-Am, New York was dominating a Bocage hardpoint. We all remember that. But when it came to the Search Destroys, they were winning them only in round 11 fashions. I think they went 6-1 in round 11s, or just in general in Search Destroy at the Pro-Am, and they were playing round 11 after round 11, overtime after overtime. And eventually those are going to catch up to you, and it obviously did for them. Now, I don't know. It's an interesting situation. A lot of people could be confused. Why do I have New York up so high? Again, I just feel like, given the fact that their major was coming up, given the fact that the players on this team have so much talent, we've seen the coordination at work before, right? We saw them take hard points. I feel like a lot of people don't remember how great they looked in the online stages. They were excellent. They were fantastic when it came down to the Major 3 qualifiers. They were taking hard points versus Atlanta, Toronto, and Optic. Those are arguably some of the best hardpoint teams, if not the best hardpoint teams that we have in the game. They were 1 round away on a Bocage Search Destroy from going up 2-0 versus the Atlanta FaZe. They took down Optic. They lost to Toronto in Game 5 when they had Scrappy in the lineup and arguably looked their best up to that point, whenever they lost to the Ultra Boys. So I feel like it was a very solid split. I think it was a LAN performance that isn't going to necessarily be replicated again. And I just feel like with the momentum around this team, the spotlight that they have gotten, and with their major coming up, I feel like we're going to truly see the best form of NYSL moving into the Major 4. And like I said, the spotlight is on them. It's not going to be an easy task, but we've seen New York when their backs were against the wall versus Optic Texas. It was a 2-2. They needed to have that winning record. They were able to take down Optic. Crib was able to have a great performance. Hydra was able to have a phenomenal performance, to cut down players like Shotzi en route to trying to think about qualification. So I think with all those things in mind, New York do advance up the standings. I think they are a tad underrated right now. And I think given their trajectory, given their point of emphasis, it is going to make them a little bit better than the LA Thieves and the Florida Mutineers and the teams that sit below them. So we shall advance to the next team in the B tier. This is our last team of the B tier, and it is going to be the Minnesota Rocker. Now, much like New York, a very lackluster performance in Toronto. They sit right now with the 9th seed in the standings. They went from a perfect 5-0 performance in the Major 3 qualifiers to getting a top 8 performance at the Toronto Major. They beat Boston, lost to LAT, as we said, through the Search Destroys, and then in the Battle of the North that happened on LAN, they got 3-0'd. So, I don't know. To me, the series versus the Thieves absolutely screwed them for sure. They absolutely could have made a much deeper run. They'd be in a much better spot when it comes to points right now. If they were able to take that series, I think right now Minnesota, despite the lackluster performance when it came to LAN, I think that the problems are fixable. Again, I guess I'm relying a lot on these two teams who had unfortunate performances on LAN. I feel like I saw enough online to be like, yes, it is possible for them to do that in a LAN environment. It's not as if we're talking about a group of rookies. We're talking about experienced players, especially when it comes to the Minnesota side. I expect them to be able to replicate this, at least to a certain extent, when it comes to LAN. Going 15-3 in map count to just go top 8 at LAN, it's not something that I'm like, okay, this is just going to be the future of this team. No, they've got to have a peak, right? There's going to be a moment where Minnesota is finally able to do this in a LAN environment. As I said, they sit with the 9th seed. They have a great opportunity to steal one of those top 8 positions, whoever that may be from, as we talked about before. And I feel like they're still elite in Search Destroy. Their control looks excellent, and they're an above average hardpoint team. One of those tournaments, like I said, the last tournament that they had, it was to me on one of their bad days. It was on an off day, and it was versus a team like LA Thieves, who I feel like if you're really any team in the CDL, you don't want to see when it comes to a LAN environment. I don't think that gets replicated, and I sit firmly at the fact that they are the leaders right now of the B tier, considering that they just had that performance and very well could sneak in to the A side of things if they look great in the qualifiers and have a solid performance when it comes to LAN. So we will see. Now, the first team of the A tier. This is where things get a little dicey. I like this. First team of the A tier that we're going to be talking about is Toronto. Yes, Toronto Ultra currently hold the number 5 seed. They have looked sensational lately. They have turned around their season from where it was. They had a 3rd place finish at their own major. They showed new life indeed. Insight and Cammy look like they are starting to get back on form, if not in full form right now. They've gone 13-6 in hardpoint at Major 3. They had a 10-game winning streak in Search and Destroy. It feels like the pieces are slowly starting to come together, and they're starting to prove to themselves that they deserve to be here, right? Ever since the Pro-Am, ever since that we saw Scrappy even fill in for the Toronto team, and he started to feel the pressure, right? Having the 2 academy teams at the Pro-Am, it feels like Toronto got kicked in the back. They're like, okay, like we realized they got made aware of the fact that they could be replaced, any 4 of them. We all struggled to make moves or to predict who would be the player that you replace on Toronto, right? Is it Bance? Is it Kleenex? Is it Insight? Do you get rid of Cammy? Who do you get rid of from the Toronto team? And so I feel like with that level of concern or question, especially the ARs realized, hey, our spot could be up for grabs. Like, we got this really talented guy named Scrappy who just played a phenomenal series for us, helped beat New York. I think that really inspired Insight and Cammy, especially to level up their game and to really try and improve. And they have looked excellent lately. The only thing that I have for Toronto is the sample size. That's the only thing that I'm missing right now. I want to see it happen consistently because I have loved seeing Insight and Cammy go off. Trust me, Toronto is one of my favorite teams to watch in the CDL. The hardpoint has looked excellent. The S&D is on fire. However, I want to see it at least in the very first few games that they have. I want to see that trend continue. And that is the only reason right now for Toronto, despite having a top 3 placement while they sit in 4th, the only reason why I don't have them elevated a little bit farther forward is because I want to see a little bit more. That is the only reason why Toronto does not sit a little bit further in the standings, because again, this was one of the more controversial, or at least one of the more debatable moments that I had with myself going over these rankings and discussing the teams. So the next team that we have in the A tier is going to be Optic Texas. Now, there are lots of rumors floating around right now as of this moment, and me recording this in real time. Illy, it seems like, is not going to be playing. It appears that ProLoot will be playing in his spot moving forward. So that is something to very much consider. I'll be honest with you. If Illy is going to be here, I might move them ahead. To me, it really came down to if Illy is playing, is ProLoot playing. That decided a lot on where both of these teams, or rather where this team sits right now, if they would be back a few spots or up a few spots, etc. So, as I said, ProLoot, it sounds like it's going to be playing for this team in Major 4, maybe even at Champs. Maybe he gets filled in for, maybe Illy comes back halfway through Major 4. Maybe Illy comes back strictly for Champs. I have no idea. And so it's a little difficult to predict where Optic Texas sits right now. However, thinking about them in their current form, it just feels like the team that we saw has started to hit a peak. Like they're still losing to the Florida Mutineers. They're dropping series versus the LA Thieves. Like, have they hit their ceiling? That is a true question to ask right now when it comes to Optic Texas. And, regardless of what happens in the online atmosphere, they very well could finish off 4-1 like they did at Major 3. But when it comes down to being outright on top of your game, like, when we talk about this Optic team, we know what they can do from a number standpoint. We know the talent that exists on this team. But when it comes down to, like, hey, we are facing off against a team on the other side of the stage where they know about us, we know about them. We just have to perform, and we just have to play our very, very best. Can that happen? Like, can that happen at a consistent rate? Now, when I say consistent, it's never going to be perfectly consistent with every team in the CDL, but it's got to be better than it has been as of lately. And I'm a huge fan of Illy. I really am. I'm a huge fan of Illy. I think that he is unbelievably underrated when it comes down to this team. I feel like the system that he has built has made it very easy for somebody like ProLoot to step in and obviously perform well on. I don't know. It's like I'm somewhat conflicted because I thought about putting Optic behind Toronto, but coming into this video, I had a quick change of heart, and my thought process was this. ProLoot coming in, Optic's going to basically have to realize, hey, you know what? Screw what has been going on. Who cares about all the back and forth that we've had to do? ProLoot is our fourth, and that's all we're going to think about right now. I think that is going to be the mentality moving forward, to where they're not like, oh, well, how about you play this position until Illy gets back? How about we do this until Illy gets back? You can't have that focus right now. Major 4 is not the time. In fact, the time has run out on doing strategies, thinking about things like that. It is not time to dabble or think about what could happen in the future, or maybe, if we do this when Illy gets back. You can't. You just got to put your head down. And I feel like for that reason, Optic Texas will be at their best with ProLoot lately. I think moving into the Major 4 qualifiers, I think they're going to be at their best. I think ProLoot having that LAN opportunity was great for him. I know he's not played at a ton of LANs before. Obviously had that, slow opening series that a lot of people are going to be talking about, if he can really be that guy for them. The Search Destroy performances have started to slow down a little bit, but talent is obviously there. I think Illy definitely makes Optic Texas better than with ProLoot, but I feel like this Optic Texas team, now with the shift, the mentality focus, shifting a little bit, now realizing, hey, we just got to focus up. I feel like this team is going to be into the third spot. I feel like that makes sense. Again, I feel like you could, have Toronto above them, but I just think that even with Illy, this team would be here. I think having ProLoot now just in the back of your mind, like, hey, okay, he's just going to be here. We just got to focus on what we got right now. There's no time to keep doing what we've been doing. You got to move Optic forward for that reason. So that is why I'm moving Optic into the third spot. Who is going to be moving into the second spot? It is the Seattle Surge. Currently have the number 3 seed, I think, number 4 seed? I think it's number 3 seed right now. And the overall standings for the CDL. Just what a run. What a run, right? That they were able to make, when it came down to the Toronto Major. They have a wild matchup versus the Atlanta FaZe in the winner side. They took them down again in the finals. To beat Atlanta FaZe twice is incredible. the entire team started to hit form right after they had that opportunity at Major 2 where Matt gets sick versus Atlanta in the middle of the series. He has to play through that. They go to like a game 5, round 10 or round 11, I forget, lose to Atlanta, the team that they have historically beaten a majority of the time. It felt like the path was there. And what happens if Seattle meets up with the Gorillas when it comes down to the finals? What happens if Seattle has a chance to make a run themselves? That puts them ahead in points. That maybe brings their confidence up if they're able to beat Atlanta again in that matchup where Matt gets sick. I don't know. It's an interesting ride for Seattle again, because it feels like they have had really high highs and really low lows, and the fact that they were able to do this just kind of, it legitimizes the lows a little bit. It almost kind of rises up to make you think, okay, Seattle is not maybe inconsistent. Maybe they just had an off tournament. Is really what it does, what that W says about the Seattle team. But again, the young talent was out there to perform. Accuracy was excellent. It's just Seattle finally hit their stride. I think there are still questions on Seattle. I mean, it very well could be Seattle that drops a little bit behind Optic, that drops behind Toronto as this major goes forward, which is something that we'll have to keep our eye on. When it comes to the top 8, though, Seattle are sitting pretty. There's no worries there. And I think if you're Surge too, I mean, this is a very tight-knit race between these 3 teams especially, and obviously the Atlanta FaZe and where we put them. And so, I mean, if you just drop a certain series, that can move you back 1. You drop another series, that can move you back another tier, when it comes down to all these teams. But I feel like you have to give Seattle the respect that they deserve. A second-place finish, beating Atlanta FaZe twice is incredibly impressive. And the route that they were able to do it, the fact that all basically the hopes that this team would reach, the levels that we really hoped that we could see this team reach, as we were teased at when it came down to the kickoff, they were finally able to do it. Again, a very solid young group who, again, has a very, very bright future. Pred, Civ, and Mac, unbelievable trio with accuracy leading the way. It's a match made in heaven right now if you're a Seattle fan. So you got to put them in the 2nd seed. But what happens with Atlanta FaZe? Do we put Atlanta FaZe in the A tier just above Seattle, even though Seattle just beat Atlanta? Atlanta technically, right? I mean, they've got 2nd place at every single major. I've seen this conversation a lot. Is there actually an S tier team right now in the CDL? I went back and forth on this quite a bit. I'll be honest. I went back and forth on, should Atlanta be right here, or do they deserve to be in the S tier? I'm going to keep Atlanta in the S tier. I am. That is the final decision that I'm going to make. I absolutely see the convo, the discussion that is there with Atlanta being an A, not an S. However, I think consistency is key. The fact that they have been able to finish 2nd place at every major is astonishing. It's actually very impressive. Now, the fact that they've lost every single one definitely makes you concerned. There was obviously, to me, a little bit of something there for sure. It's not just like, oh man, we lost again. There's some mentality block, I think, that is formed with the Atlanta FaZe, and when it comes down to these finals of like, are we really going to lose this again? Like, is it going to be a finals loss versus Optic? Are we going to lose versus the Gorillas? Is it going to be back-to-back? Are we really going to lose 3 majors in a row now versus Seattle, the team that has had our number, it feels like, ever since Cold War? It feels like the mental lapse is there. However, the fact that they've been able to get to that point, the fact that they're number 1 in the standings, the fact that they've been able to do what they've been able to do, you got to give them props for that very reason. So while they've never technically been number 1 when it comes down to a major, they have got to sit at number 1, considering the laps that we've seen from Seattle, the laps at times that we've seen from Optic, the laps at times that we've seen from Toronto. How many times have we had pretty much every single one of these teams a tier lower than where they are right now? I mean, we've seen London up here, we've seen LAG up here, Boston up here, Minnesota, New York, LA Thieves. All these teams have shifted dramatically except for one. Atlanta FaZe has been an A or S pretty much all season long, and I intend to keep them there. I think they deserve it still. I think, again, the case is obviously there. The fact that they have struggled historically versus Seattle, the fact that they have yet to beat Texas technically, when it comes down to series, versus that roster, no matter who's been playing, whether it's general or pro loot, you have to keep that in mind. The constant 2nd place finishes, but Atlanta FaZe is still got to be considered. With all the craziness of Vanguard, the team that is yet to win still has to sit above the rest because of the fact that they've been able to do it so far throughout the season. And it is almost a guarantee that Atlanta FaZe very well look to be in a great position to make the finals again, right? How many teams can we say that for? Are you going to tell me that Toronto is guaranteed to be in the finals? Are you going to tell me that Seattle is guaranteed to be in the finals? Optic Texas right now are guaranteed to be in the finals, or any of these teams? No. Right, Atlanta FaZe, you feel confident in saying that. And for that reason, that is why I've got them in the S tier. Now, folks, feel free to let me know. Do you agree with my list, or do you have a few disagreements, right? Is it the Seattle, Optic, Toronto side? Is it A, B, C tier? Do you have Paris maybe advanced? Do you put LAG or Boston in the D tier? Let me know. I would be very interested to see, what your guys' predictions are, what your thoughts are. Feel free to send me your own tier maker list, where you have every team sitting right now. I would love to see what your guys' thoughts are. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. Greatly appreciated. ROSTERMANIA has been wild. It has been crazy, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all shapes up. As we said, going into the Major 4 qualifiers, heading into the New York Major, and into champs. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will catch you for LandO's lock-ins not too far away for all of our pick 'em predictions when it comes down to our first week of matches. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you for the next video.